Hi everyone. For homework this week, we're going to be getting started in After Effects. So just like with the other two programs, you have a few different options. You can use After Effects in the New Media Arts labs, and I have a lab hour PDF right here. You can try a 7-day free trial of After Effects, and I have the link right here. It's the same link as the other programs, so the way you set it up would be the same. Just make sure you install After Effects this time. Or you can pay for the 1-month subscription of After Effects, and I have the link right here for that, and it's the same setup as the other two programs. Alright, after you decide how you want to work with After Effects, next you're going to start animating your draft with the goal of having it about 25% complete for next Monday. The first thing you're going to want to do is download the project folder right here, and to do that, you can right-click on it, and I'm just going to hit Save Link As. And on a Mac, you'll hit Download Linked File As. I'm going to save it to my desktop, which is chosen here, and I'll just hit save. So I put everything into a zipped folder, and what that does is just compresses the folder into a smaller size. To unzip it on a PC, what I'm going to do is right-click, and then I'm going to select Extract Files here, and that's just going to extract them to my desktop. And if you're working on a Mac, when you right-click on this, you should have an unzip option, and that'll do the same thing. It's going to unzip it, and you'll get this folder here. I'm just going to replace my name here. Okay, I'm just going to delete this one because I already downloaded one earlier and set it up. Okay, so I have my assets folder here, and if you open it up, you're going to see all of these folders here for your assets. So all of the content that you downloaded last week, you have to organize it into these folders. Like I showed you in the importing assets tutorial, if you don't have them in the correct folders, when I go to open them, those are going to be missing assets and I won't be able to see them. So I have all of my content in the correct folders here. Now before I open up the project template here, I'm just going to replace my name on this one as well. And then I'll just double click it to open it. Alright, once that's open, one more time we need to replace this one with our own name. And that's the last one you should have to change. Okay, next you're going to want to import all of your assets. So I'm just going to open them up, and I'll just drag and drop them in. You want to make sure you drop them into the project panel here, but you can also drop them directly into the folder you want. And again, I can also import my assets by right-clicking, import, and selecting File. I also already put all the studio logos in the graphics folder for you, but if you want to make your own logo in Illustrator for it, you can go right ahead and do that. Alright, I'm just going to start building my composition just to give you an idea how to actually get started with your movie titles in After Effects. If you already think you have a good handle on it from the tutorials, feel free to skip this part, but I might cover some tips and tricks that I don't cover in the other videos. Also at the end of the video, I'll be showing you how to zip the folder and submit it for homework. So even if you skip this part, fast forward to the end just so you can see how to hand it in. Alright, so I think the first thing I want to do is maybe drag some video in just to get started. I'm not exactly sure what my movie is going to be about yet, but hopefully I figure that out as I go. So I have some aerial footage of a forest here. I'll just drag that and drop it into my timeline. And if I hit spacebar, it'll play through that. So the video file is longer than the actual composition, and if I just drag it, I can drag it to see the end here. So you can move it around in here all you want. I think I'll have it start right at the beginning though. Okay, so I think the first thing I want is to have a studio logo come in. So I'm just going to go to my graphics, and I'll choose a logo. Some of these are black, so you're not going to see them in here, but you can just double click on them to see them in the viewer. I think I like the New Line Cinema one, so we're going to go with that. And I can just drag it. I can either drop it into my timeline down here, or I can drag it and drop it exactly where I want in my viewer. So I'll just drop it right there. That looks a little too big, so I'm just going to scale that down. And to do that, I can select it and just hit S, and that's going to bring up my scale option here. And I covered all of this in the animation basics video. So I'm just going to scale that down. Maybe something around there. And I think I'll just lower it a little bit. If you want to see the very middle of your composition, you can click this little icon here and then select the title action safe. And then I can see that that is the middle of my composition. So I'm just going to line it up, maybe something like that. And I'll turn that off now. All right, so I'm not really sure how I want this to animate in, but let's try a few different things. Maybe we'll start with the position. So since I know that this is the final position I want it to land on, that will be my final keyframe. So I'm just going to go ahead a little ways in my timeline, and I'm going to set my stopwatch, and that'll set my first keyframe. So I have a keyframe there, and it's keyed in this position. So that will be its final landing spot. So I'm just going to move forward now, and I'm going to just move it up and out of my page. So now when I hit play, it's going to move down in. So I'm not really happy with the way that looks, so maybe let's try a different way to animate this. And I don't want to delete my keyframes here, or it's going to keep it up at the top there. If I just delete those both out. I'm going to undo that. What I'm going to do is move my slider to this keyframe, and now if I delete them, or just turn off my stopwatch here to delete all of them, and that's going to remove them. Okay, maybe let's try a scale animation, and we'll scale it up from 0 up to this size. So again, since I want it to land on this final size, I'll make that my last keyframe. So I'm going to set a scale keyframe there, and now I'll move back to the beginning, and I'm going to scale it down. I want it to come right from nothing, so I'm just going to click on it and hit 0. Now when I play it, so it jittered there for a little bit, and that's because the green bar was loading, so it wasn't playing in real time. Now that the green bar's loaded there, we can scrub it back to the beginning, hit spacebar to play, and it's going to scale up. That looks kind of cool. It's way too slow, so maybe I can just move my first frame up a little bit, and then it'll scale up a little sooner, and has a little bit of a delay at the beginning here. Alright, that looks okay, but let's try just animating the opacity and just having it fade in. So I'm just going to delete these scale keys, and I'm going to hit T to bring up my opacity. Okay, so I'm going to key it right there at 100, so it's already keyed at 100%. Now if I move it back a bit and bring that down to 0, it'll fade in. Alright, I think I like that the most out of all the ones I've tried. It can maybe fade in a little longer. And then we're also going to want it to fade out now. So I want it to sit on for a little while. I don't want it to just fade on and then immediately fade out. So what I want to do is copy this keyframe where it's at 100% opacity and just move it down a little ways so it'll sit there. And that in animation is called a hold. It's going to animate to one keyframe, and then it's going to hold for that same keyframe. We're just copying it, and then it's going to keep animating. So to set a keyframe here, I can just hit the little diamond here, and that's going to set another one at 100%. And now I can scrub over a little bit and then bring this down, and it's automatically going to set a keyframe at 0. So let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's looking cool. It could fade off a little quicker though. And maybe not sit on quite so long. So a lot of animation is just testing the timing and adjusting your keys until you get a look that you like. All right, I think we'll go with that. What I also want to begin with here is maybe just to fade in from black. I don't want it to start on my footage immediately. So to fade in or out from black in After Effects, what I like to do is use a solid. So I'm going to go up to Layer, New, and I'll select Solid. And I want it black, which is selected already, and it's already set to our composition size. And right here, I'm just going to name it to Fade In. And I'll hit Enter. Okay, so what that did was create a new solid here, and you'll notice when we make a solid, it's going to create a new folder here, and that's where it's going to store all of our solids. So any one we make, it'll put it into this folder. And I'll just collapse these to make some more room. Okay, so right now I have a black solid over top of everything, and I want it to fade out right at the beginning here. So with it selected, I'll just hit T to open up my opacity. And I want it to start at full 100% black, so I'll set my first keyframe there. And then I'll just scroll forward a bit, and I'm going to bring that down to 0. And now when I hit play, it should fade in. Alright, so we have this nice little fade in at the beginning. That can maybe be a little longer, so I'm just going to bring that key over. Yeah, I like that fade. But now I think my logo maybe fades in a little too early. So now I'm just going to select all of my keys to move them all over, and I can move that anywhere I want, but I'll just have it start a little later. And again, I'm just hitting spacebar to quickly preview it. And right there, it didn't play in real time. You saw the little jitter because it wasn't fully loaded. So now I'll just go back and hit play. Okay, I like the way that looks. Now I'll have my next piece of text, which I think should be presents. So New Line Cinema, fade out, presents, and I think I'll have that fade in as well. All right, so to do that, I'm going to use my type tool here. I'll select that, and I'll just click my cursor anywhere in here. And I'll just type out my text. I'll just slide this over to the middle, and again, I want to find the exact middle, so I'm going to hit my title action safe. It's right there, so I can just line that up right there. And I know that these two dots here are in the middle of it, so I'm going to kind of line those ones up. Okay, that's not the text I want. To change the text, I'm just going to double click on my layer to highlight it. And now I can go through and pick a new one. Maybe something like that. And I'm just going to make it a little bigger. Okay, so right now I have presents on this layer here, and since I don't have it fading out, it just pops on right away. So I'm going to want it to fade in after my logo. So I'm going to select it. I'll hit T to bring up my opacity. And right here I want it to be completely off. So I'm just going to slide that all the way down to 0. And I'm going to turn on my keyframes. Okay, so I'm going to scrub forward and then bring this back up to 100. And let's just see how that looks. Okay, I think that could fade in a little slower, just like with my New Line Cinema logo. So I'm going to drag that final keyframe over, and I think it can fade in a little sooner, right as the New Line Cinema logo fades off. Maybe a little forward. Yeah, something like that. And again, I just want it to hold for a little while. So I'm going to scrub forward a little ways, and with it still at 100%, I'll hit the little diamond here to set a new keyframe. And then I can scrub forward and bring that down. And it's going to automatically set a keyframe at 0. You'll notice that my layers are all open, and it can start to get confusing with which one I want to work on. So to collapse all of them, if I just deselect them, I can hit U, and that will collapse all of them. If I press it again, it'll open up whatever has a keyframe on it. And if I just select a layer and press U, it's just going to bring up the keyframes for that layer. So this is a nice way to get to your keyframes without having to go through here every time. Just press U. Now, since I have stuff fading off on my composition, I don't need these to fill the entire timeline. And especially if everything's collapsed, I don't know exactly where one thing ends or one thing begins without seeing my keyframes. So I'm just going to trim these to the size that I need them. So I'm going to select my fade in, and I'll just hit U to see my keyframes. So my last keyframe is there. I don't need any of this past here. So what I'm going to do is just go to the very end here. You'll see my double arrows, and then just drag that forward. So now if it's collapsed, I know that this layer here is only visible for this part. So this just makes it a little easier to visualize my timeline and see exactly when things are going to be visible. So I can do that for presents as well. I'm going to come to the beginning here, and I'll just bring the front forward. It doesn't have to be exactly on my keyframe. I just want to make it a little neater in my timeline. And if I want to extend this later, I can drag a keyframe, and even though it cuts off, I can just extend that now. I'll just undo that. And I'm going to have my logo turn off right here as well. And I also don't need it at the beginning, so I'll do that. You don't have to do this, but again, it just makes it easier. Now, you'll notice with my video, if I wanted to trim it here, I can't grab the very end here because it goes off the composition. But I don't want to really move it because if this is the exact spot I don't want to move it in and then trim it. I'll undo that. So I'm going to show you a quick tip to make this easier. With the layer selected, I can go up to Edit, Split Layer, or you can use the shortcut Control-Shift-D or Command on a Mac. If I hit that, what it's going to do is split my layer into two. And now since I don't want this one, I was going to drag it in anyway, I can just select it and hit delete. And now my video ends right there. And again, if I wanted to extend it, I can just bring it back in. So it doesn't actually delete it out forever, you can always just bring it back in. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, I have my presents pop right off here. I trimmed this too soon, so what I'm going to do is have that fade out. Now I already know that this keyframe here is at 0%, so I could just drag this down to 0 to set a new keyframe, or with my time slider in the right spot, I can have this one selected, and I'll do Control-C and Control-V to copy and paste it. So now it pasted a 0% transparency keyframe right there. And then I can just drag that forward because I don't need that anymore. And I think for this draft, what I want to do next is just put in one more video file. I'm just going to drag this forward a bit because I think I'll cut somewhere in here. All right, I think I'll try maybe this leaves footage right here. So I'm going to drag that in and just drop it down there. So now since this is above it, we don't see the leaves layer underneath, but we can turn off that eyeball there. I'm just going to turn off the sound right now because we're not doing anything with sound just yet. I do have a tutorial coming up that's going to cover sound and how to work with it in After Effects. So now when we get to the end here, it's going to cut to that clip. I kind of like how these go together. The aerial footage of the trees cutting down to the ground level of the leaves here. But I think the cut might be too abrupt, and I think I want to crossfade them. Now, a crossfade is where one video clip just fades out over another one, and that's easy to do in After Effects with just keying our opacity. So I'm going to hit the shortcut T with my forest selected. It'll bring up my opacity, and so right here we want it at full opacity. I'll hit the stopwatch, and then I'll just slide forward in time, and I'm going to bring that down to 0. So now between these two keys, we fade out of this clip and into this one. And it's not playing in real time yet because it still had to load. So now that one fades out and reveals this one. The fade is a little fast, so I think I'm going to drag it forward and make it a little bit longer. Yeah, something like that looks cool. And just to make my timeline less confusing, I'll drag the beginning of my leaves layer up to here since I don't need any of this. So now, when everything's collapsed, I know that my leaves aren't going to start till somewhere in here. Alright, so for your 25% draft, I just want you to have a couple things in that are already animated, so something like this would be enough for this week. I think though I'm going to just put in one more bit of text here, after that fades from one video to the other. So again, I'll just grab my type tool, and click it in the middle here. So I want it to say presents a Byron Heel production. Grab my selection tool and move it somewhere to the middle. I'm going to bring this down in size, and I can just use my font size here to scale it down. And just shift it back. Okay, so right now, this is above everything, so it's even above my fade in. So I'm going to want to drop that down under presents. Again, it spans my entire timeline, so we see it for the whole thing. I'll just bring this forward for now and cut that in until I get my keys to where I want them. So I think production fades out about there. So I'm going to hit T to bring up my opacity. And I'm going to hit my stopwatch there with it at 100%. Move it back and then drag that down to 0. And then I'm going to go forward. I want it to sit for a little while at 100%. So again, I'm just going to slide forward and I'll set a keyframe there, and it's going to set 1 with 100%, and then I'll scroll forward and bring that down to 0. Now, I didn't really check the timing as I played this, I just wanted to get my keys in. I'll hit play to play through it, and then I can adjust my timing afterwards. So I'm going to go right to the beginning and hit play. Okay, so that's a little fast. This comes in a little too soon. So presents I think I want it to come in after our videos fade, and I think I actually want our videos to start fading right as presents is fading out. So what I'm going to do is hit U on my forest one just to see my keys, and I'm going to drag those forward. So right about there, we're already going to start fading out. And now, since we're fading out here, I need to drag this back because there's nothing actually under that. Let's see how that looks. And again, it just had to load, so I'm going to bring it back to the beginning and hit play again. Yeah, that looks cool. I like how it fades out presents kind of as this starts to fade. And so I think right about there, my next title can come in. Yeah, that fades in a little too fast, so I'll stretch that out a bit and maybe have it come in a little sooner. Yeah, I think that's looking good. I think this would maybe work as a horror movie if I get it right, so I'm going to change my text color to something a little different. So with it selected, I can click on my fill color here, and again, if these aren't showing up, just go to Window, and that's my character panel. And maybe let's just pick something a little reddish like that. And we'll hit OK. Still a little hard to read, so I might put a drop shadow on. And we went over this in the Layer Styles tutorial. So I'm going to click on it. I'll go to Layer, Layer Styles, and I'll select Drop Shadow. Already that brings it out a little more and it's easier to read. To go to my drop shadow settings, I can just click on here. It already opened it, but if it didn't, I can expand that and then go down to drop shadow. I'm going to open that up and I have some options in here. So I've gone over all of these already, so I won't do that again. I'll just start adjusting these. I think my distance was okay there. I want it to kind of be a little feathered, so with that, I can just adjust the size, and that feathers it out. Maybe just a little bit. And I also think it should be a little darker maybe, so I'll put the opacity up to 100. Alright, so that helps to bring it out a bit from that background and makes it a little bit easier to read. Now I'll also want that shadow here, and instead of adding it and doing all my same settings, what I could do is just select it in my Byron Heel layer, hit Ctrl C, and I'll just collapse that to make it easier to see. I'm going to click on my Presents one, and then Ctrl V to paste it. And what that did was paste a layer style under here, and we have drop shadow. It's a little hard to see on the background here, but I just wanted to keep it consistent with my other text. Alright, I also want to change the color of it, so I'm going to go over here, select it, and I'll bring up my swatch. Now I want to make sure I get the exact color as my other text, so I want to color sample it, but it's not on screen for me to sample, and I can't scroll forward. So here's a little trick for that. I'll hit cancel, I'll scrub forward to my text that I want to take the color from, and then with my layer selected that I want to change, even though we can't see it right now, I can still change the color. So I'm going to select my swatch, grab my eyedropper, and select the color there, and then I'll hit OK. And so that changed the color here. Now I want my New Line Cinema logo to also have that color, but since this was a graphic that we brought in, I can't just change the color on it like I did with the text. So to do that, I'm going to use the color overlay. So I'll go to Layer with it selected, Layer Styles, Color Overlay. And so that automatically overlays it with a new color. So I'm just going to go into my options here, and I'll expand the color overlay to change it. So if I click on it, I can bring up my swatch here, and I'll just grab my eyedropper, and I actually have the old swatch here as well, so I'll just select it from there and hit OK. So now that is the same color as everything else. Alright, let's just play through that one more time and see how it looks. So you could see right up here in the corner, right above our playback panel, it says not real time. So it's going to play through once and load, and then it should start playing real time, which it is right now. So if you see that up there, just know that that's not real time it's playing in. And you'll notice if it's all jittery and slow. Alright, so I think that's looking cool. It's a little further than you need to be for your first draft, but I just wanted to give you some examples for how to add layer styles, just get some basic animation going, and just get started on your project. Okay, so once you have it to where you're ready to hand it in, what you're going to do is save it, and you should be saving quite often as you go. So I'll just hit save, and then I can exit out of it here. Okay, so I'll go to my save folder. And now to hand it in, what you're going to do is zip this. So you're going to create a zip folder like I did here with this one. So I have some zipping instructions in the homework section here. If you just go down to here, you can click this and it's going to bring up a zipping instructions PDF. And so it shows you how to do it on a PC and also on a Mac. So what I want to do is just right click on it, and I'm going to select add to archive. You're going to have different options depending on what computer you're on, but just follow those instructions. Now I want to make sure that I'm doing a zip folder, and I'll just hit OK. And now it's going to zip it. Alright, so once that zips, what it did was made a copy of this folder here and zipped it into this compressed folder. So I need to have all of your assets in the correct folders and your After Effects file, all zipped into the Project 3 Assets folder that I provided you with. And then you're going to take that zipped folder and you're going to submit it to me through the UH file drop, just like you have been with the Photoshop projects. And once you're done with that, take that link and paste that into the assignment section in La Lima. And that's what you have to do for homework this week. Let me know if you're having any problems at all or having trouble getting started in After Effects. Alright, that's going to do it for this video.